Heather. I'm a nutritionist and a GAPS practitioner, and I just wanted to share today 5 of the most common reasons that people fail or quit the GAPS diet. And so hopefully if you're starting out or you're in the process, hopefully you can watch this video before and prepare yourself and not make these mistakes, okay? Because I hear them a lot. So the first mistake people make is jumping into the diet before they've read the book. It's really, really essential that you've read one of Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride's books. So you have Gut and Psychology Syndrome, which is the yellow one, and this one is her older book. It's been revised, so it's very relevant and up to date. But this one's focused more on psychology, so everything mental from autism, eating disorders, bipolar, depression. It's all going to be the mental kind of stuff. And it's a slightly smaller book. It doesn't go as in depth. And then this is her newer book. It's Gut and Physiology Syndrome. So the premise of both of them is the same. The diet's the same. Everything's really the same, but this one is focusing more on physical problems. So chronic fatigue syndrome, migraines, maybe food allergies, intolerances. What else do we got here? Fatigue, neurological disease, hormonal problems, gut problems, allergies, autoimmune disease. That's big for this one. It's a little bit thicker, and it's slightly different, but they're both explaining the diet. They're both explaining the gut-brain connection. And they're very thorough. And so you have to get one of these books, whichever is more applicable to you. If you're really trying to go after maybe mental health problems or autism, maybe the yellow book's gonna be better. If you're going after like an autoimmune disease, this and more like physical pain symptoms or something, the blue book might be slightly more applicable. So make sure you've read a book before you fully start the GAPS diet. Now, when you're going through the process of reading the book, you can start doing meat stock or doing fermented foods and like slowly trying things out, introducing them, but you don't want to go full into GAPS before you've fully read one of the books. And I highly recommend you get a pen and you mark it up and you underline, you put sticky notes and note the chapters that are really applicable to you, because you will want to not just read this one time, you'll want to look back on it a lot. It's really, really important. So you have to do that, but you got to know what the diet is about and why you're doing it, because it's full on. And if you don't remember why you're doing it or like fully understand, you're probably not going to stick to it very well. So that's number 1, read the book. Number 2, biggest problem that I see is parents not being on the same page. Either your spouse isn't supportive of you doing the diet, or you're trying to make them do the diet and they don't really want to do it, or you really feel like your kid needs to do it, but your spouse isn't on the same page. So it really is not fun working with people who the mom is this is typical scenario, the mom is super gung-ho on GAPS, wants to do GAPS. The husband is not on board, doesn't understand it, has honestly probably seen the mom go through a ton of like therapies that are definitely gonna work this time. And he's probably really skeptical of this other one, and it doesn't just want to throw a ton of money down the drain for some other therapy claiming to work. So that's not a good position to be in, especially as a practitioner, like feeling like my job is to convince the husband to do GAPS, or I'm getting in between their marriage and they're fighting over GAPS. It gets messy really quick, and if you're not both on the same page, it's probably going to fail, unfortunately. So anything you can do to get your spouse on board, I highly recommend humility. Sometimes it's hard and frustrating, but coming with humility and saying like, hey, I really feel like this is gonna work. Thank you so much for being supportive of all the other therapies we've done. I know you love our daughter or son, and I know you want what's best for them. Can you please, I'm just asking that you would listen to one of Dr. Natasha McBride's, YouTube videos. She has YouTube videos where she's speaking at conferences, and you can start out with that. And she's not woo at all. She's a medical doctor. She is quite smart. She knows what she's talking about. She's got decades of experience, personal experience and clinical experience, and she's just brilliant. So usually one of the YouTube videos will be enough to kind of make people start understanding, and it's hard not to love her. And then asking your husband or spouse, sorry I keep saying husband, just your partner, to read the book as well. You both need to read the book, because it's also terrible when your husband hasn't read the book and you've read it, and so he's coming to you with questions. What about this? What about this? What about this? And you're feeling like, okay, is it my responsibility to answer all these questions? I don't even know. I'm still learning myself. So both being on the same page, both reading the GAPS diet before you start, getting into it. Those are essential. What is number 3? Number 3 is starting too fast and getting easily overwhelmed. A lot of people are like, yeah, I was classic example. Yes, GAPS made a batch of bone broth, only was drinking bone broth for like 2 days. Clearly not, this was 12 years ago, clearly not doing it right because I wasn't supposed to be making bone broth, I was supposed to be making meat stock, but I just like couldn't wait to get into it, so I probably read the first chapter and was just like committed. And it worked out for me, but for a lot of people, especially if you're cooking for a family, it's like just way too much. So if you're coming from a standard American diet or like processed, start slow, get a good water filter and then make a batch of meat stock, and have realistic expectations is another part of that. Like, your toddler only eats a pack of cookies and chips, that's all they'll eat, and chicken nuggets. Okay, well, don't expect them to be eating GAPS food overnight. Celebrate every little win when they have a spoonful of chicken stock. Yay, that's all part of it, starting slow and having those realistic expectations. I think that's so crucial, and being stoked when you make some fermented foods that you've never made in your life. Knowing that every step that you take toward GAPS is a step in the right direction. You're moving in the right direction, and you want to constantly be, slightly challenging yourself and moving forward and getting closer, but not overwhelming yourself. Please, please, please don't overwhelm yourself. Okay, number 4, this is not keeping a food diary. Not keeping a food diary. So I tell clients all the time to keep a food diary, and very few of them do it. And I get it because there's so much going on. You're cooking all the time. You're always in the kitchen. You're always blah, blah. But keeping a food diary is really, really, really essential for a few reasons. One is you are not able to remember what you ate a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. You may have a general idea, but I promise you, your memory is not that good. You're not going to remember how much stock you had, and you just can't keep an accurate representation of it. And when you get stuck and you don't know what the problem is, if you don't have things to look back on, it's going to be really, really, really hard to find the triggers or what you might be reacting to, or if something's die-off or histamine reaction, or you just can't, there's no way to tell. And I meet with people and they're like, help, this has happened, and I'm trying to figure out what they're eating, and it's like they can't remember. They're like, oh yeah, stock. Okay, how much stock? Oh, I don't know, like a couple cups. Yeah. And then I think I had like maybe 4 cups. It's like you actually need those specific answers. So it is so important to keep a food diary. I know it's an extra step, but if you can just write down what you're eating and any symptoms you experience that day, and be specific. 1 tablespoon of sauerkraut, 2 tablespoons of this, 3 tablespoons of this. Oh, I made sauerkraut with garlic in it. Oh, when you look back, you can go, oh, I had a huge reaction when I added the garlic in, where you wouldn't have noticed that before. It's also really important because then if you get stumped and you're like, why is this happening? My son's getting these weird eczema patches. He's never had that before. And then you bring your food journal to your practitioner, they can look at it and go, oh, it's clearly dairy, or it's clearly once you introduced eggs, or it's clearly has to do with this thing, or, even things like, you have chronic headaches, and you can look back on your diary and go, oh, weird, I had a headache every day after the day I went to grandma's house. And then you can easily identify, oh, grandma might have mold at her house or something like that. Like, just things you wouldn't think of, your practitioner may be able to easily see the correlation, or you can look back and maybe see a correlation where there's no way of kind of knowing things like that. Like if grandma has mold in her house, you wouldn't realize until you see that clear theme of, oh, every time I wrote down I went to grandma's house, the next day I had a migraine. There you go. So I just find that really, really, really essential to have a food diary. Another thing that's beneficial for is not only identifying problems you may be having, but it also helps you really see how much progress you're having over the years. Like if you are dealing with depression, the first few months, maybe like really depressed, can't get out of bed for, I was in bed 6 hours a day. And 6 months later, you're frustrated because you're like, I'm still depressed. It hasn't gone away. But then when you actually look back on your food diary, you're like, oh wait, I used to be in bed 6 hours a day. Now I just sleep in an extra hour. And yeah, I still feel blue, but I'm not in bed suicidal for those 6 hours a day. I'm just making this up. But food diaries where you're also logging your symptoms can really help you look back and see how far you've come and see how much healing's actually happened. So that's really important, and I'm going to do a video on specifically how to keep a food diary. That will be helpful. And the fifth one is having unrealistic expectations. A lot of people have unrealistic expectations for GAPS. I often hear people say and make claims like, oh, I started being a vegan and I just feel amazing right off the bat, or I cut out gluten and I just felt amazing, or I started the carnivore diet and I just felt amazing. Feeling amazing doesn't necessarily mean you're moving in the right direction. If I have a coffee, I feel amazing. Does that mean that's really good for me? Maybe not. Maybe it's really bad for my adrenals and my brain health. Or sometimes if I had a cheesecake, oh, I'd feel amazing. But the next day, am I going to be feeling great? Is it actually a good representation of health for me? Probably not. And yeah, veganism. Yeah, if you're eating tons of carbs all the time and your blood sugar is constantly like, whoa, and you're having smoothies and all that stuff, you can feel really good initially, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily the best thing for you. So GAPS is very different because I think people tend to think, oh, if something's good for me, I must feel amazing. Where GAPS is really getting to the root of the problem. It's cleaning up your gut, and as a result, you're gonna feel, I'm just gonna be honest, you're probably gonna feel like crap for a month. Minimal 2 weeks, you'll feel bad. You're not going to feel horrible necessarily, but I wouldn't expect anyone to start GAPS and be like, I feel amazing, because you're having all these bacteria in your gut die off. They're releasing toxic gases. Yeasts are dying off. Things are being cleaned out. All your organs are detoxing, and sometimes that's really unpleasant. Your whole microbiome and your whole body is changing. Changing your food sources. You're getting rid of things that keep a lot of that bacteria happy, like those sugars and refined grains and all that. And so, yeah, you don't feel good. And so when people can come to terms with that, or kind of expect that they're probably not going to feel great, and they may have a worsening of symptoms, like, if you have migraines and all of a sudden you cut out all sugar and coffee and dairy and like all these things, your body may manifest in migraines for a few weeks, and that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It means your body's detoxing and it's healing and it's just clearing out stuff. So yeah, having those somewhat realistic expectations, especially if you have children who are on the spectrum and they can't communicate really how they're feeling or what they think is going on. If you know that often things get worse before they get better, you're not going to be shell-shocked when you do GAPS, and you're not going to quit, and you're not going to go, oh, it's not working. You'll probably go, okay, I've expected this. I knew this was coming. I talked to most people. Yes, tons of people have flu-like symptoms. My daughter's super cranky. Her symptoms are way worse, but I've expected this because I know her whole gut microbiome is changing and tons of toxins are leaving her body. And tons of these bacteria are like sending out toxins as they die off. And yeah, her little system's overwhelmed temporarily. So, it's like when your kid gets sick normally. Why are they so fussy? What's going on with them? Why are they having meltdowns and crying? Oh, they're teething. Oh, they're not feeling well. So I think that's essential, keeping those expectations initially low, but then long term having an expectation that they're going to get better. So I hope these are helpful. I really want people to succeed on the GAPS diet, and I think those are some things you really should consider. It's worth doing that, initial investment before diving into GAPS. It's take the time, watch the podcast, or listen to Dr. Natasha McBride speak, read the books, get your spouse on page, have realistic expectations of yourself and whoever is doing the diet, and give yourself tons of grace, because no one in the world has done GAPS perfectly. The best GAPS practitioners, the best GAPS coaches, the best advocates for GAPS diet that know the most are the people who've messed up the most. Dr. Natasha McBride created this diet out of her own failures with her children. And Becky Plonner, who's a great naturopathic doctor who loves the GAPS diet and is a big advocate of it, she knows so much because she worked through it with her son who had autism, and she failed a lot, and she did bone broth instead of meat stock, and she accidentally did tons of histamines before she knew about it. And so yeah, everything is for learning. It's all growing. It's not going to be perfect. And I hope this helps you. And yeah, thanks for watching. Hi, thanks for watching my video. You can feel free to comment or like below, or you can follow me on Instagram or on my website.